Yay Networks.
Hey guys, episode 59 here. We have a very special guest. He's my favorite, Jeff's boss. He's a stand-up guy, family man. And I actually just Googled him today, and he has a whole list of everything he's done. I will let Jeff do the introduction because he is your boss.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to get into all that stuff, but I want to introduce him. An Emmy Award Winning Producer. How many times over?
How many Emmys?
Yeah.
One national Emmy.
One national Emmy.
Other locals and Ace Awards that people don't even remember anymore for cable years ago, but the Emmy was for the Sally Show, yeah.
Sally, you didn't win one with Jerry Springer?
What, are you kidding me? They couldn't give us an Emmy.
We're going to get into all that.
Well, you couldn't say his name.
Burt Dubrow.
Yes.
Yeah,
So this is
Dubrow.
How do you want to pronounce it?
I want you to correct me.
Dubrow.
Dubrow. Burt Dubrow.
But everybody says Dubrow, and I've told my kids, fine, go with it.
Do you know why I go with that? Because what's that surgeon's name?
Yeah.
We always have to say bro.
Yeah.
His name's...
Oh, the Beverly Hills surgeon?
Yeah, they came on a show, and we took pictures together. It was fun.
Oh,
Yeah. All right, so Burt, I'll let you start us off a little bit because I know, we've talked all the time. Great guy. So you know so much about this television business. I don't know how much our audience is into that, but they watch us on Big Brother. They're interested in the ins and outs and behind the scenes. But you got started. You knew you wanted to do this at an early age.
I did. I knew. My mother joked and said when I came out of the womb, I knew. And I have never known anything else, ever. I mean, which sounds a little sort of cool now, but it wasn't then. Because no one else knew what they wanted to do. When you're 10, you just do. Me, I was watching I was getting up and I was watching television. I would get up on Saturday mornings. It's true now. At 5:30 in the morning. And there was this is in New York, in New Rochelle, New York. I would get up at 5, whatever it was, and watch a farm show. It was a tractor going through fields. Now, first of all, I don't know why that was on in New York, number one. And number two, I don't know why I was watching it. But I watched it because after that show started Saturday morning television for kids. And at that point, it was, I'm going to age myself here, but at that point, it was Roy Rogers and all these Westerns, The Lone Ranger and Howdy Doody and The Merry Mailman, all these shows. And you could not get me away from that. But it was different than most kids. I would be waiting, literally waiting, to maybe see a microphone get in the way when you shouldn't see it, or a camera. And if I did, which I did, because a lot of stuff was live then, they'd make mistakes, I would scream, Mom, Dad, look at that, there's a camera. I'm sure they went in the other room and go, who cares if there's a camera? Why does he care about that? And so it was rough. It was not an easy place to be if you were me. It sounds like it was good, but it wasn't good.
Yeah, but knowing what you want to do at a young age is a great thing, and having that focus.
It's a great thing. That's what people say now.
Right.
But it wasn't great because I would hide it from friends of mine because, first of all, it wasn't cool to say you wanted to be in television. I mean, it just wasn't. And not only that, nobody could be in television. Like, the odds were so against you.
Right.
So I stayed away from it in terms of my friends. And I was always different, right? Like, you and I have talked, and I know what your childhood was like. Mine was the opposite. You couldn't get me near a baseball field. You couldn't get me near a football field because then I would miss what was on television. I mean, this is true, and God willing, the person I'm talking about will never hear this, but I had a girlfriend all through high school. I was the only one. 3 years. We were together. She's married. She's happy. All's good. And if I was at her house and we were doing whatever we were doing, I would check my watch to see if I could get home by 11:30 to see Johnny Carson's monologue. This is how bad it was. I mean, that's all I can. Now, I should have. Now, it wasn't that I didn't care about what I was doing at the time.
Right.
It just was I got to get home to see that monologue. And it was always like that. Always. I never knew
that. Did you go to school or did you start working as like an intern and kind of learn your way? Like Jeff didn't go to school to be a host.
Right.
Or like broadcasting. You were telemarketing. No, what did you do? Communications?
Marketing. I got my degree in.
I'm glad you just learned just that. Let me go back. Okay. I'll go back and tell you what happened.
Yeah.
So I'm 10 years old, and I'm on the playground. And Howdy Doody was huge back then. The Howdy Doody show was humongous. If you take Sesame Street, multiply it times 1,000, that's what Howdy was. It was huge. So anyway, I'm on the playground, and this kid says that Buffalo Bob, who was the host of the show, it's going to sound weird.
I've heard it, yeah.
You know this.
Yeah.
Should I tell?
Yeah, of course.
Bought a liquor store. Now, Howdy Doody's still on the air. And so there's Buffalo Bob, and you think he'll be like Mr. Rogers saying he owned a liquor store. It didn't make any sense. But the kid said it enough that I had to find out about this. This was too close to home. And the liquor store was in New Rochelle, where I lived. So I did a little research or whatever I did, found out there was a bus that goes from the south end of New Rochelle to the north end, where supposedly the liquor store was. And I walked, didn't tell my parents, by the way, very important part of this, didn't I tell them? And got to the bus, the M bus, and went down until I saw a liquor store on the south end of New Rochelle. Remember, I'm 10. And I got out, and I see a big sign that says liquors, and I walked in, and I even remember that my chin was like up to the ledge. Yeah, the counter. And I said, "Is Buffalo Bob here?" and I did. And there was a man there with black horn-rimmed glasses and a check shirt on, and he said, "I'm Buffalo Bob." Well, that made no sense. He wasn't dressed like Buffalo Bob dressed. Buffalo Bob did not wear glasses. This made no sense to me at all. But the more he spoke, I heard that voice, and he had a real definitive voice. And he reached down, and he handed me a color picture of he and Howdy, and he signed it. I was like, like that. I could not believe this. First of all, I couldn't make sense out of it because he didn't look like that man on television. But anyway.
You're like a Christmas Story when you see Santa.
Yeah, like Clark Kent and Superman, same kind of thing. So anyway, now I get back on the bus, and I go home. Now it's like 4:30, from school. My mother's ready to kill me. "Where were you?" I said, "I was at Buffalo Bob."
A liquor store.
She looked at me like I was out of my mind. I mean, and it was almost like, he's nuts and fun. Well, I kept going back and back, and it reached a point where there was a big glass window. So if I was walking up to the liquor store, I could see in the window that Bob saw me and he'd run in the back. And then I'd walk in and the guy would say, "Well, Bob's not here." but I knew he was there. So anyway, eventually he pushed me across the street to his brother who sold shoes. His brother's name was Vic, older brother, 10 years older. And he used to say, "I'm in booze and my brother's in shoes." This was his sense of humor, right? Very funny. And so I got friendly with Vic, very friendly with Vic, because Vic had no kids, and I was sort of like the son that Vic never had. Anyway, eventually my father, one day, probably 2 or 3 weeks later, was going to get liquor. And he used to shop at a place called Gene Greco's liquor store. So I said, "Don't go to Gene Greco's. Let's go to Buffalo Bob's liquor store." So I remember my mom and my dad looked at each other like, "Let's get this over with. Enough of this already." So I took him on the M bus route, right? That's all I knew. And walked into the store. I think he was surprised to even see there was a liquor store there, Walked in, and as soon as I walked in with him, because it was later, it was in the evening, there's Bob and goes, "Hey, there's Burt." And my father turned a color that I don't think is on any scale anywhere, and couldn't believe it. And he went and introduced himself. They had a little chat. Now, this is how big that Howdy show was. Expectant mothers would write for tickets while they were pregnant. So by the time their kids were 3, 4, 5 years old, they would have tickets. That's how popular the show was. You couldn't get tickets. Now, this is 1960. It was the end. I mean, it was winding down, but still, it was popular. Anyway, the two of them were talking, my father and Bob. They called me over there, and Bob pulls out of his pocket. He says, "Here," and he hands me 10 tickets to the Peanut Gallery, the show. I did not know what to do with that. I just, and I remember, because I overheard this, Bob said to my father, "You'll never stop this. If this is what he loves, this is what he loves." So anyway, now they were taping Howdy then. Howdy was the first show to be on videotape 5 days a week. First show. And so they were taping it, and they would tape, because it was on Saturday mornings now. It used to be on 5 days a week. So on Saturday morning, so they would tape 3 or 4, and then take off for a month.
Right.
So anyway, I only had a black and white television. We didn't have a color TV. It was too early. And if you were rich, you had a color TV. We were not rich, so we didn't have a color TV. So do you remember in The Wizard of Oz, the beginning of it, and then she opens that door to Oz in its color?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
That's what this was for me. We walked in the studio. I had never seen these colors before because all I had was black and white. Sure, everything looked black and white, And I was like a kid in the candy stores and understand it. I couldn't believe it. Not to mention, I got to see the cameras and the microphones and all that. And I had I gave friends of my tickets, so 10 friends or 9 friends were there. And so we're there and just, looking around, and I can see Howdy, and I can see all the puppets. They're hanging, they made no effort to hide to make, have the kids think it was real. They're hanging, anyway. And Clarabelle, who was the clown on the show, didn't speak, and I saw him there. Anyway, all of a sudden, through those cameras comes Buffalo Bob, in quotes, in that suit, that he wears.
Right.
No glasses. The guy that I watched every day.
Right.
And screams out, "Where's my buddy Burt?" All my friends.
So you were so cool.
Yes, I was so cool. At that moment, I was cool. And he says, "Introduce me to your friends. This is my buddy Burt. I want you to all know how Burt came to the liquor store." I told him the whole story. And that, believe it or not, began a relationship that he and I had for years. And then you asked me about school. I was in school in Boston at a communication school, yeah. And it was called Graham College, and it was 632 Beacon Street in Boston. And we had 2 color studios and like 16 radio production studios. The BU was right down the street. They would come to us because we had more than they had. I'm not sure why, but we did. So anyway, I read in the paper, this is 1971, I guess, that a guy at the University of Pennsylvania wanted to have a nostalgia night and thought, where's Buffalo Bob? Because now it's 1972, so Bob's off the air 12 years now. Retired in Florida, fine, right? And this guy found Bob. So I'd never met this guy. I still don't know his name. His name's Bart Seidler. If this guy's alive, I will eventually meet him, but I never met him. We had talked on the phone. Anyway, so he gets a hold of Bob and says, "Look, we're thinking of doing like a memory kind of night, a nostalgia night. Is there any way we can get you to fly you up to the University of Pennsylvania?" Bob said, "Well, what would I do?" And this guy said, "Well, do you still have the buffalo suit that, you wore?" He said, "Yeah." "Do you have a kinescope and film of the show?" "Yeah." So Bob, not knowing a lot, got on a plane and went up there. I think the auditorium held about 1,500 people, and about 3,000 to 4,000 kids showed up. Now, this is in the middle of the Vietnam War. No one's happy. Everybody's high. They're all smoking. It's a nutty time. And he's doing this. He goes back to Florida, playing golf with his friend who's a publicist, and he's telling the publicist this story. And he says to Bob, "You want to go back to work?" "What do you mean?" He said, "I can get you colleges. They'll pay big money for you, see you." Because he was like our first father image in a way.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm in Boston. I read that he's coming to Boston. New England Life Hall. I still remember the place. And so I call Vic, Bob's brother. I said, I got to get a hold of Bob. Got to get a hold. So he gives me his number. I call. I said, "Bob, it's me. It's Burt Dubrow." "Oh, Burt."
How old are you at this point?
I'm 20, whatever. I'm 20, 21, something.
Yeah.
Like that. He said, "Yeah, I'm coming up. Why don't we have dinner? And then you could see the show." I said, "Great." So now here I am now, years later, in that same position. I'm sitting with him. He's still got those damn black glasses on. He's not wearing that friggin' suit or anything. But I'm having dinner. We're having a nice time. And now he says, "All right, I got to change. You go into the theater." I go into the theater. And it started out with a film of the old show. And then he comes out to a standing ovation. I can't even tell you. People went nuts because it was like seeing a ghost. Nobody had seen him in all these years.
Right.
And everybody idolized him. As a kid, they just loved him. And he did the show. We had a drink afterwards. I went back to my dorm. I called Vic. I said, "I have to be his road manager. He needs me. He'll die." He had a heart attack in the 50s. So I said, "He'll get another heart attack. I got to be his road manager." Long story short, that it happened.
Wow.
I left school. I had to go home to my parents, and I said, look, I'm leaving school. Where are you going? I'm going to go to Buffalo Bob. And I remember my father looked at me and said, you think this is a good move for your future? Because that, that was going to end.
Right.
I said, look, yes, this is my way in. And that was my way in. That was my first.
And then how, because I mean, we could go on and on and on. Maybe we should let's take a quick little break, and then we'll come back because I have some more I want to talk about.
Sure.
All right. So 7 months of no drinking for me.
Good for you.
Actually, no. 8 months.
It's
August. 8 months of no drinking for me on a wellness journey. I've been drinking my AG1 for 8 months now consistently. And I say this all the time. I can always tell when I don't have my AG1. When we went to Cabo, I brought travel packs for my dad because he ran out of his AG1. It was actually going to be delivered while he was in Cabo with us. I brought you and myself and some of our friends extra AG1 because everybody was going to be drinking. And I knew everybody needed the vitamins since we were traveling.
That's right. And I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because it's tested for 950 contaminants and banned substances, while the industry standard is typically, guess what? Only 10.
AG1 obsesses over product quality, the standards of manufacturing partners, and sustainable practices.
We had a lot going on over the last couple months, but the one consistent thing that I have is AG1. I take it every single morning. It cuts my vitamins into a handful at most when it was up to 20 or 25 a day. And that's the one staple I've been leaning on through all this mess.
I like making my AG1 8 ounces, 8 to 12 ounces. Jeff likes a smaller amount. People always ask that, like when they're first starting out with AG1, and they're like, how much should I do? When I very first started, I did 4 ounces. And then now I like having it as like a drink in the morning, and I drink it on an empty stomach. It has zinc and vitamin C. It doesn't make me feel icky, gross. I always feel good. I've been healthy since taking it. But I personally prefer to drink mine 8 to 12 ounces.
Yeah, I drink just 2 to 4 ounces. First thing I do in the morning, whether it's get up and I work out or get up and I eat breakfast and go to work, AG1's the first thing I do in the morning. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3+K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/togetherness. That's MESS. That's drinkag1.com/togetherness. You got to check it out. You can thank us later. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're back. We're already chatting over the break about other stuff because I have so many directions I want to go, but I kind of want to streamline it. How did you get in to kind of being with Buffalo Bob to working with Richard Pryor and Andy Kaufman, too? Because Andy Kaufman's the one that fascinates me. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
You don't know what from Taxi? Lockup from Taxi? You know Jim Carrey, Man on the Moon?
Do you remember, did you ever watch Taxi? Then you're not going to know. It's not going to know. It's okay.
Well, this is still, Andy Kaufman's a legend.
I know Richard Pryor.
Okay. Well, here's what happened. So when I was on the road with Bob, we would do all kinds of appearances at each town we went into. Bob would be on this television show, that television show. So there was a little break for a while. I don't remember exactly how this happened, but I was back in Boston, and I was working for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, believe it or not. It's the closest way I could get to Jerry Lewis in my own head. And so I was working for the local, and there was no connection to Jerry Lewis.
But in your head there was.
In my head there was, yeah.
Yeah.
So a guy who used to be a host in Chicago, I guess 2 years prior, was now in Chicago. He used to be a host in Boston, was now in Chicago. They flew him in. His name was Bob Kennedy. And he had a big show in Chicago called Kennedy and Company. Each ABC station, O&O, owned and operated station, had their own morning show. Okay, Chicago was the biggest one, Kennedy and Company. But they brought him back to Boston, because that's where he used to be, to host this local muscular dystrophy telethon. I'm there at this party that they're throwing ahead of time, and I meet Bob Kennedy. I didn't know who the hell he was. And we start talking, and I'm talking to him the way I'm talking to you guys now. He's asking me all these questions. Next thing I know, his wife comes over to me. I'm like, whatever I am, 21, 22, introduces herself and said, my husband loves you. He wants you to be an associate producer on his show in Chicago. And I thought,
Just from that talk?
yes. And I thought, right. Next thing I know, Bob comes over to me and he says, look, I'm going to have my program manager, Squire Rushnell, call you, and I want you to be an associate producer on my show in Chicago.
Wow.
So, but I thought it was BS.
Yeah.
And I waited 1 week and 2 weeks, and nothing happened. And then like the fourth or fifth week, I got a phone call from Squire Rushnell, and I became an associate producer at WLS in Chicago, 190 North State Street, right across from the Chicago Theater.
Yes.
And there I was with my first job in television. And none of it, for whatever reason, was enough for me. Like I always was thinking, I got to do this, or they shouldn't be doing this. Or like I knew more than everybody else, which of course was not the least bit true. And one day I had this idea to do a live trivia show at night, at midnight, or just old television, because that's what I love. And they thought that was a great idea. They said, well, now you got to find a host for this because someone's got to be into trivia to be able to do this. And I found out that, here's another name you won't know, Alan Ludden, who you may not know, who was then the host of Password, big game show.
I remember Password. Yeah.
He was the host. And someone told me that he was a real trivia nut. So I got a hold of his office. I did. And called up. Now, Password was on CBS. This is ABC. So,
Okay.
so they should not match. So I'm talking, finally, this secretary said, I'm going to have Mr. Ludden call you. Now, they don't know that I'm 22 years. They have no idea. So I'm talking to Alan Ludden, and I talk him into it. I had to come in and do it.
How?
I just
How
did.
does that, I feel like now, if you did that,
Yeah. Well,
Can't
I
worry.
probably couldn't do it now, but I did. And
That's
but here's the humor of the story.
Yeah.
The funny part is that when he finally came in to do it, the lady at the secretary at the elevator where people came in called me and said, Burt, Mr. Ludden is here. So I walk out to the elevator to meet him and go to shake his hand. He looks at me, he goes, you're Burt Dubrow. And I said, yeah. He goes, and he grabbed my face. He said, you're just a baby. And I think here was the interpretation of that. I got on a damn plane for this.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I think he was thinking. But we became really, if you can be friends at that point, we became close. And he helped me, and we kept in touch, and he was just the most wonderful guy. He was a big star.
Yeah.
I mean, for people that remember Password, or you Google it and look it up, Alan Ludden was the guy. So that was my first job in television, was at WLS. And then I went on from there. I was never satisfied. But I met,
How did you hook up with Andy Kaufman?
well, that goes back to school. That goes back to Graham.
So that's before this.
Yes, so Graham, so we'll talk about
Because
him.
that's funny because you used to drive him around to his gigs.
Oh, yeah, before anybody knew who the hell he was. But yeah.
But I mean, this is Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
I know you don't
When
know
you
what
look
this
it
is.
up,
This
you'll
is
see.
crazy.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
and the people probably that are listening or watching will know Andy Kaufman. So Andy, when I was at school, when I got to that school, I did not read the brochure. Isn't it like you should read the brochure? And I get there and find out you can't touch the equipment your first year there. I thought, well, what the hell good is that? You can't touch a camera. What am I doing here? You know. So I had to figure out a way around this. So I started a show. There was a school station that was on all through the dorms and all that. So I started a show called the Graham Spotlight that I hosted, put together, the whole thing. It was all mine. And with an audience, it was the Tonight Show, but it was for that demographic.
Right.
All right. We made fun of, everybody. I made fun of everybody. And I did like a monologue. I did it all. It was out of my mind. I was
I love it though, because you had that vision.
yeah, I
at
had the
such a
vision.
young age.
I knew what I wanted to do. So for instance, there was an admissions guy. I hadn't thought about this in years, but there was an admission counselor. His name was Charles Reynolds. He was a tall, thin, bald, lanky guy, and he kind of talked like this. Very weird. He was the guy you saw if you were going to think about going to Graham. And so I went to him. And I said, listen, I got this show, Mr. Reynolds, and I'd love you to come on. I'd love you to come on. But I have everybody do little things. This is what I'm saying to him. So I had a sweater, like a college sweater with a big G on it, and a megaphone, big megaphone like this. And I wanted him to lip sync this song called Winchester Cathedral, which I knew would make him look like a complete fool, which was the whole idea. That all the dorms would be what. So he says yes. And so now I'm there, and I just picture a desk and couch and all that. And I say, blah, blah, blah. Please welcome our admission counselor, Charles Reynolds. And I sit there and talk to him briefly about admissions and what's it like to get into the school. I said, now I understand you can do a number for us. Yeah, I said, well, just like you go set up and I'll introduce you. So he said, set up, and I said, blah, blah, blah. Please welcome, Charles Reynolds singing Winchester Cathedral. Well, we taped the show. The show was on tape. So we would do it like on Mondays, and then Wednesday night it would air. So I got to go around all to the dorms and everything and watch what the reaction was to what I was doing to see if it was any good. It's like my own little focus group, really.
Yeah.
And there's everyone hysterical at this man and what I was doing. So every week I did this. Now, one day I get a knock on my door from this kid, Andy Kaufman. He holds his hand out. He says, my name's Andy Kaufman. Burt, I've seen the show you do. I think maybe I could do some stuff on the show. I said, what do you do? He said, I do a bunch of things. I imitate Elvis. He was the first one to really do Elvis. I do these characters. And he says, Memphis, I'm working on a character, but I haven't done it yet. I'm not too sure. And it's an old nightclub comic, and he's very rude. And, of course, that Tony Clifton.
Wow.
Yeah. So we did a bunch of things. He explained to me how he met Elvis. And the first time he came on, he told that story. But when he told me the story in the dorm, it went pretty quick. When he started telling me on the show, it's going on and on and on, to the point that I had to stop and say, look, you got to come back next week and finish this because people want to hear this. So he told that, and then one day he came to me. This is typical Andy. He said, look, I got an idea. Why don't you introduce me this week? And I'm going to say, I'll be in front of the audience with the microphone, and I'm going to say I'm doing stand-up comedy now. I'm going to try stand-up comedy. And it will be terrible. That's what he's saying to me. It's going to be horrible. I'll be so bad. I said, if it's so horrible, what do you want to do it? He said, don't, it'll work. He said, but once it gets really, really bad and I'm getting no laughs, I'm going to just start to cry and say, all I'm trying to do is put myself through school. You people won't even give me the benefit of a laugh.
You got to know Andy Kaufman a little
yeah.
bit. He got off, and correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't care what the reaction was, whether it was good or bad. A horrible reaction got him going, right? It didn't matter if it was good or bad.
And it didn't make him nervous?
He would bomb so bad that he wanted the audience to get mad. He used to set up these crazy wrestling matches against women. Like, this was later on in his career. But he was a nut. He was a nut.
Andy's feeling was that he had to move you. As long as he moved you, it could be booing, it could be laughing, it didn't matter. But he would, that's all he cared about.
I wish I had that confidence.
Yeah, right. Me too. That's right. So anyway, he says, and then when I get so bad, I'm going to pull a gun out of my pocket, right? And I'm going to start to go like that. And you jump in, throw me to the floor, commercial. I said, okay. Okay. And we did. And that was that week's show.
Did it go over?
Oh, it was great. Everybody was freaking out because they didn't know Andy that
right.
yet. So those are the kind of things that we did. And then when school was out, when we were finished, he and I remained. Matter of fact, I had him on Kennedy and Company. When I went to Chicago, and now I'm an associate producer on this, local show, I said, look, I have a guy that does Elvis. We could do a half hour with him. And he came on. It was, I think, his first television appearance. And if you go to YouTube and say Kennedy and Company, Elvis Presley, you'll see it. It's there.
Wow.
It's there. So, yeah, that was his first appearance.
And isn't it true, he used to do stand-up and bring a sleeping bag and take a nap on stage?
We would go in the city to Catch a Rising Star and the Improv and all those. And back then when you were starting out, anyone, it could be Richard Lewis, it could have David Brenner, any of these comics that were starting out then, they'd give you 3 minutes at 1 o'clock in the morning, if you were lucky. So Andy was in that boat. So we would load his stuff on stage. And I remember we'd load it. I never said much of it. I think we just put it on the stage. And then one day I said, why the hell am we putting a sleeping bag up here? Because every week we put the sleeping bag up there. Then finally I said to him, why are we doing it? He said, look, if things get really bad, I'm just going to open the damn thing up and go to sleep and let them throw me off. And that's the way his mind.
This guy sounds mental.
They made a movie about Jim Carrey played him. And man, I'm telling you, our audience, I assume, knows.
Yeah, they'll know.
Yeah, I'm assuming. Yeah, everybody knows.
And even if you don't, go look up Man in the Moon and watch it because Jim begged for that part. Jim wanted to be Andy. It was like a huge deal. And then there are documentaries about this that are still on Netflix or wherever, where Jim would not get out of character all through the movie. Like even,
oh, really?
Yeah, he Kind of really
absorbed it.
Well, no, we got.
Wow.
I think got a little too into it.
Yeah.
A little bit too into it. Anyway, that's Andy.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let's take another quick break, and then I want to get into Jerry Springer and Sally Jessa Raphael and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Welcome back. So now we're going to talk about which one do you want to go?
So what did you do first? Burt? Did you do Sally Jessa Raphael first, then the Springer Show?
Yeah.
That's how it started. So how did... Now you're executive producer. We're jumping ahead a little bit here.
Yeah, I was at what you were referring to before is I got a job on the Mike Douglas Show, which was the daytime show in the 70s and 80s, maybe 60s too. It was on for a long time. And I became an associate producer in charge of all the comedians on the show. I had as much right being there as I did standing on my head. But they hired me, and I watched that show religiously. And then there I was in Philadelphia. The show came out of Philly. And I was in charge of all the comics, all of them, which was, now think about this. I was about 20, I don't know, 27, 28. And big comedians, the biggest, are coming in. And if they're going to do new material, they've got to do it for me first, and I've got to judge it. But that's the position I was in. And I have a couple of good stories there. But anyway, that's where I worked with the Richard Pryors of the world and George Carlin. You name it, I was.
So you worked with George Carlin?
Oh, yeah. George Carlin, I will tell you. On the Mike Douglas Show, there was a co-host every week. So he was there, he or she was there every day. And the first two segments were really about that person. What were they into? What did they like? It was just all fun, all entertaining. It was all nothing serious at all. And so I had to meet George Carlin Sunday night before we did it on Monday, and I had talked to him for a while to put the week together, because the producer is responsible for that week if you're handling that co-host. I swear, I think I was talking to George Carlin for 20 seconds, and he looked at me and said, "You want to go up to my room and do some cocaine?" Now, I did not, and I'm very sorry I didn't, because I'd have a great story.
I was going to say, yeah, that's a tough position.
But that was George, and George had made the change from being a straight stand-up, jacket and tie, to the long hair and the T-shirts and the boots and all that. But he started out way back when on a show called The Kraft Music Hall on NBC, very straight-laced. He did Al Sleet, The Weather Man, all these great characters. He was amazing. But that was not the George Carlin that we got now. Now the George Carlin that I had was the one you'd know, long hair, jeans, and all that.
Right.
And he was he really was wonderful to work with. As most of them were pretty serious. And I kept saying to him, "I'm so mad. George, all I wanted to see you do was Al Sleet, the hippie dippy weatherman, all those old characters." And he's, I don't do those anymore. On the Friday show, he surprised me and didn't let me know. Everybody else knew. And he did all those characters on the Friday show for me. And it was great. So, yeah, but all those guys, Jerry Lewis was there, Sammy Davis. I mean, all the greats. It was like living in another world.
And you loved Sammy, huh?
Oh, well, yeah. So from there, so I did that. And as I say, I shouldn't have been there. Worked for a guy named Woody Frazier, who if I learned anything in this business, I learned it from him. He was, he didn't know that he was teaching me. And we clashed a little bit, because he was rough. He was rough. I mean, take the person let's not put it that way. Think of a producer that you've worked for that you didn't like.
Right.
Multiply that by 100. That was Woody. He was rough. And I did not understand that or deal well with that at all. I was scared. Every day I came into work, I was scared to death. And I did say to myself, if I ever get in that position, I'm not going to be that guy. I was pretty conscious of it. However, I was that guy for maybe about 3-4 months until I realized I don't want to be that guy. And then I stopped. But I did recognize it. Anyway, that's where I worked with all the comedians and, God, I mean, every huge star in the world did the Mike Douglas Show. It was, and we took it on location in Miami and all over the place. So I was lucky. It was a great.
So you're on your way. When do you get the call? Or how did that come about? Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to get out of New York. I had a marriage. I was married for 20 minutes, and that didn't work out too well. So
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Oh, I learned something
Yeah. That's another show.
Learned something new. You probably dropped like 10 names you didn't know.
It's another show.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I had done a show at Disney World. The Good Day Show in Boston. I was the executive producer of a big regionally syndicated show called The Good Day Show in Boston. And we had gone to Disney World to do a week of shows. And the guy who ran us, who was in charge of us, was a guy named Patrick Burns. We got to be kind of friendly. And he said to me one day, there's a job opening in Cincinnati, Ohio that I would just love, meaning him. Do you know anybody, or could you make a phone call for me? I said, well, I'll be happy to make a phone call for you. So I really like the guy. So he gives me the name and everything. I look it up. Let's forget to Sally, I promise.
Yeah.
And I called this guy, this Jim Lina, who was in senior VP of program, whatever. And I tell him what I'm telling you. I met this guy in Florida. I think it was Disney World in Florida, and blah, blah, blah. And I understand there's this opening, and he starts to laugh. I don't know this on the other end of the phone, Jim Lina. So why are you laughing? He said, because we were about to call you and offer you this job. And I said, oh, my, I felt terrible. I didn't know what to say. And
because you're making a call for a friend.
Right, yeah. So he said, look, we were not going to give him the job anyway, so you should not feel badly about it. I said, okay. So I had to call that guy. I told him, fine. And so they offered me this job. Now, this was for a show called The Bob Braun Show, which when I got there, I think was on 15 years. Oh, that's how long this thing.
That's a long time.
Right. So they take me upstairs, and I to see the show and to meet the staff. I hadn't accepted anything, but they wanted me to see it. And everybody's in jackets and ties, and they're all like buttoned up, and made me nervous. I mean, no, I'm in jeans, by the way.
Smoking cigarettes inside.
It was crazy. It was crazy. So
like the golden years of TV.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was the golden years, but this was a big show. Anyway, I didn't want to do it. It didn't seem like it was right for me. And the more I said I didn't want to do it, the more they wanted me to do it. So it finally reached the point where I sort of had to do it. So I said, okay, I wanted to get out of New York anyway, and I went there. And one day when I'm doing that show, we get a phone call. We're in Cincinnati, so major stars are not knocking down our door.
Right.
So we get a call that Sally Jesse Raphael is coming into town. I thought it was 3 people. I didn't even know who the hell it was.
Was she a name at all?
She was on NBC TalkNet Radio.
Is she a journalist?
I don't know if she'd call herself a journalist.
Okay.
She did the news for a while, but in this she was doing like a talk radio show, an advice kind of show.
Okay.
I didn't know who she was. I had no idea. Anyway, I said yes. Okay. So, because I listened to some of her on the radio and it was fine. So she came in, and as soon as she came in, she looked at me and said, "You're Burt Dubrow." I said, "Look, this would make perfect sense for me to say, you're Sally Jesse Raphael. How the hell do you know who I am?" And she said, and it turned out we had a mutual friend who tried to get her on television, and it just didn't work out. So anyway, she came in, she was a guest. She was very good. And then Bob Braun was going on vacation. And before I got there, when these guys would go on vacation, they'd bring in game show hosts. Wink Martindale and Bob, all these people to come and sit in for a week because those guys would love to do a talk show rather than a game show. So I thought, wait a minute, let me bring Sally in for a week because there's something interesting about her, and I need to put a woman on television doing a talk show during the week. There was no woman.
Oprah wasn't around yet?
Nope, no Oprah. The closest you get was Dinah Shore, who you may know from the Dinah Shore Classic, right? That's a door. But that was very light and very soft. It wasn't, the biggest talk show then was Phil Donahue, okay? Which this company owned, which Multimedia, this company that I was with, owned. So I went down to the general manager of the whole company, CEO of it, and said, look, I got an idea. If I can find a woman to host a talk show like Phil, would you consider it? And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, why a woman? Because it was just foreign then. There was no woman. And here's ready for my answer? Yeah. This was my genius answer. I said, if Phil, who had done this, was doing an hour show on a woman's menstrual cycle, that's exactly what I said, it goes one way. If a woman is doing it, it's got to be different. It's got to feel different. Oh, and he looked at me and he said, all right, okay. And we made a little development deal. And I went and we did that week with Sally I put a tape together of all these different segments that I tried out, and I brought it to them, and they sent it around to the stations because multimedia like Tegna owned a lot of stations. And they came back to me, and this is what they said. They kind of like her. But why does she wear red glasses? Why does she need those red glasses? I said, well, to see. I mean, she wears them to see. And I said, why? I said, well, I actually asked her about the glasses, and she said they were cheap, and she had no money. They're plastic, and that was it. He said, well, they don't like the glasses. Wow. So I said, no. I said, okay. So we hadn't started the show yet at all. We were doing like little tests because the show started in St. Louis. So I said to her husband, go to an optometry store and get me 5 pair of the ugliest glasses you can find for Sally. Just the ugliest. And his wife said, just shut up.
Just do it.
Yeah. So he did, and we met in St. Louis, and we were, testing things, and no audio. I just had a medium close-up of her, and we put this first ugly pair on, and the second, third, and then finally the last pair with the red glasses. That's all you just saw. Put it on tape, put it under my arm, went back to Cincinnati, and said, look, here's my response. Look, what do you think, And they look at this tape that I, of course, manipulated, and look at me in straight face and said, you know what? Those red glasses are not too bad.
Because you got even uglier ones.
And that's how the red glasses stayed. They were hers. People, they were not my idea. But I did say to them, and I did, that if we're ever lucky enough for anybody to know who we are, they will become a trademark if we're that lucky. We weren't even close to being anywhere near that, But those red glasses meant something to me. And
how long was she on?
20-some-odd years. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
And you were there the whole time?
I was, the last several years I wasn't there. We started October 17th, 1983. It was the first show. It was a half hour. People don't know that, but it was a half hour to start out. My brilliant idea of doing a half hour and trying to do 2 topics in a half hour, that didn't work. And then we became an hour. Then we got Grand Rapids, Michigan was our first station we got. And so I would run around telling everybody, we're syndicated. We were in St. Louis and Grand Rapids, Michigan. It grew. We were trying to find ourselves. The actor Kevin Kline?
Yeah.
He was our first guest on the very first show. And we just tried things. Oprah was not on yet. And one day we got a letter. The radio show this woman wrote a letter to the radio show. It never got to Sally. So the woman tried the television show. She had heard about the TV show. And it was, her name was Stephanie. Still talk to Stephanie to this day. Stephanie was raped and never told anybody, including her husband. Oh my God. And wanted to tell Sally. And people, the question I still get to this day are, how did you get people to tell these stories and say this stuff on television? And I say, they did. They just wanted to. And so we brought Stephanie, we flew her in. She had never been on an airplane in her life. Wow. We brought her in. We were up with her all night because she was like, sorry, she didn't say this, but we kept her up and we did it. And anyway, we did that show. And Sally said, Stephanie, tell me your story. And it was like the audience went and like held their breath for that whole hour, half hour, I think it was then. And then when it was over, she says, and I remember thinking, this is the show. This is now the show.
Because Phil wasn't doing that, right?
No, he was doing it, but different.
Okay.
Different. Phil was doing everything. Nobody was better than Phil. He was just the best. But it was like, Sally, I'm going to tell you my story. That was what in my head. Now Oprah comes on.
I was just about to say, because Oprah, I feel like, got people to open up like that.
Yes, that's right.
So
that's exactly right.
Competition.
Well, Oprah came on like a storm. It was unbelievable. And I was angry because I had the only woman and I just couldn't get it rolling as quick because Oprah was so amazing that it just, took off.
Yeah.
Now, what people don't remember, like Jordan just said, is that she did those kinds of stories way back when. And she did, a lot of things that she wouldn't do in the later years, but she did them in the beginning. And I wouldn't watch the show. I was so angry. And then finally, I remember the little group we had. I think there were 6.
You're talking about the Oprah show?
Yeah, I wouldn't watch it. I was so pissed off. I was so angry. Anyway, I watched it one day. And to me, when I saw it, everybody was crying. Every guest was crying. That's what I saw. So I remember I brought our group together and I said, look, they want crying? We'll give them crying. If that's what's working, we'll do crying. And we did. And, everybody that came on cried. I mean, we did stories where people were very unhappy and very sad, and there was nothing happy about the show. And we began to take off. And then now remember, the Donahue show was our show too. Phil got everything, and rightly so. Every guest he got, we didn't get anything. We were like, new kids on the block.
Yeah.
And one day, a book comes across the desk called Lesbian Nuns Breaking Silence. I knew this was going to be good. Right?
Yeah.
I knew this was going to be good. Yeah.
And Phil passed? Or you didn't?
No, he did not pass. And I got a call from my boss. His name was Dick Thrall. He's gone now. He was an amazing man. Saying what he always said to me. That's good. Phil wants that. Phil wants that. Well, I put my foot down on this one because I knew it was us. I just knew we had to have it. I said, Dick, no. Enough, enough. You don't give us anything. I want to do this. Phil can do it after us. But we always do it after Phil. Give me a chance. And somehow he did. And we did it. And it was a really soft, nice, quiet show to hear these two nuns talk about their lives. It was just very compelling. And I was very big with close-ups. Huge with close-ups. And I don't mean this kind of, I mean this kind of close-up.
Right on your face, yeah.
Yeah. Big with that. And anyway, we did it, and it took off. People knew about it. And then it was interesting. Phil did it about 2 weeks later, and I had to watch it. And it was just different. Phil's running around the audience, and people are screaming and yelling. That's how he's listening. So that was sort of the difference. We were a little quieter. And that helped us take off. And then, we exploded. But it was always Phil, Geraldo, Sally, Geraldo Rivera. Mm-hmm. Phil, Geraldo, Sally. Phil, Geraldo, Sally. It just make me crazy. Phil, Geraldo, Sally. And it just would make me nuts. Nobody would pay attention to us. Now, we're in St. Louis, Missouri. Phil's in Chicago or New York, and Oprah's in Chicago. And how do we get noticed? I mean, it was so difficult to do, to get known. And, eventually, the Emmy Awards came up, and every year we'd have to go.
I remember you saying you going up against Oprah.
And everybody. And we didn't want to go. First of all, why would you want to go to lose? I mean, but they made us go every year. And then there was one year, I remember Lynn said to me, my wife, she said, I'm not going. I said, I'm not going. You're not going to make me go. I'm not going. I don't need to do this again and get all dressed. Fine. So, and it was a big deal because the makeup people would have to do all the producers' hair. We'd have to, Anyway, and every year Sally would say to me, don't even come to me and say we have to go. And I'd say, go ahead, I won't. Then I'd go to her and say, we got to go. So anyway, this year we went, and we're sitting there, and it was the same thing, Oprah, Geraldo, whatever, who I forget who it was up against. And this is ABC primetime, by the way. Okay. This is how big daytime was then. Huge. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting juxtaposition.
Right. And, it's like 8 o'clock at night, and it's on ABC television. And so we're there, and they get to the talk show, best talk show, not talk show host, best talk show. The nominees are Oprah Winfrey, and the clips, the thing, Geraldo, and the winner is, they open the envelope, Sally Jesse Raphael. So I did not hear that. I heard Oprah Winfrey in my head. I didn't hear it. And the guy was sitting next to me, Jeff Smith. I remember he was on PBS. He grabbed me and said, get up there. And
did you pause? Were you like, wait, is he joking?
I didn't know. It all happened in seconds. So, when you watch these award shows, or used to watch these award shows, and you see these idiots get up, and you say to yourself, why do they sound like morons? Why are they not prepared?
Yeah.
That was me.
Did you prepare anything?
Of course not. Why would I prepare anything? We lost every time. We didn't want to be there. There's no reason for me to prepare anything. So now I'm that moron up there. And by the way, when you get up there, when there's like 30 seconds left, there's a red light that blinks. And that's how you know you have to get off. In my head, and I still think it's true, the moment I got there, I saw that red light. It was like, I got to hurry up. So the producers were behind me, the 5 producers, and I thanked them, I remember, and said they're the backbone of the show and blah, blah, blah. And then I did say our families and Allie, Liza, and Lynn, and I said, we did it. And everybody went nuts because we were the underdogs. And
was Oprah there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oprah was there. Yeah.
Looking at her?
Oh, she thinks she cares. She won 72 awards. She won. Give a damn. So anyway, you know when you walk off, like, where do you go? I never knew where you went. So you walk off, and they take you into this press room, and you're on like a little riser, a little stage, and Burt here, Burt over here, Burt over here, Burt over here, and I'm holding the Emmy Award. And Peter Lund, who was the president of multimedia at the time, just a champ of a man. One of the best executives, maybe the best executive I ever worked for in my life. All this is going on, and I look in the corner, and I see a little door open, and there he is. And I'm getting choked up just telling you. And he looked at me and did that. Like, he knew what it took. And he also knew, like, he would never call Sally. He would call me and say, here's what I'm going to talk to Sally about. What do you think? I mean, always, that's how it always went. It went that way. And we won, and then the next year she won as host. Now, what's interesting, a lot of people don't know, and I didn't know this, that when you win for show, the host does not get the Emmy.
Really?
Yeah. No.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. Yeah. And so the producers got the Emmy. And
Do you just get one, or does everybody?
Everybody gets it.
Oh, everybody gets
Sally too?
No.
Just the producer.
Just the producers, not the associate producers. This is why, by the way, in the business now, and it could be happen to Big Brother, they'll say it's the casting producer, or it's It used to be it was the booker, but they put the word producer on so that if they ever get an Emmy Award, they win it. That's how that happened.
Really?
Yep. So you hear casting producer or this producer or that. That's why. So now if the word producer is there, you get an Emmy. Or that's the way it was. I'm assuming it's still.
Where do you keep your Emmy?
I've seen it.
It's in our family room up on the fireplace, almost hidden. I mean, it's behind a plant. Somehow people see it when they come in. They notice it. But that's where it is. And look, I never thought I'd get an Emmy Award. I mean, I wasn't in this. I was in this to meet Buffalo Bob. You know,
For the love of the game.
Yeah, not to get an Emmy Award. And
Yeah.
and so that is how Sally began. You have to take a break?
Yeah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wrap this up because it's such great stuff, but we're going to have a part 2. So come back.
Part 2 will be Jerry Springer.
Exactly.
Yes.
We're going to talk about Jerry Springer next week, or in the following episode. And we're also going to talk about Daily Blast Live because obviously Burt came to Daily Blast Live.
What's the show?
Daily Blast Live. and then, I mean, everything that happened, you guys, I've caught you all up to date. You know, I'm kind of bringing them through my journey as it happened. So right when we found out we were canceled till now, it's been a couple weeks, but I've been bringing them through the journey, and we're going to get you guys up to speed next week. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. This was a great episode. I hope you guys like it, and there's more to come next week.